Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to Slate's recap of the debate that some are calling a low point in Western civilization. I'm Jim Newell. I am a senior politics writer for Slate. Lily?
I'm Lily Loofborough. I'm a staff writer at Slate.
I'm Will Salatan. I'm also a writer at Slate, and I have the ridiculous title of national correspondent.
It's a wonderful title, Will. So I guess we're just going to start to talk about broad takeaways here. We've had 24 hours to think about this debate a little bit more. I can personally say it's not getting any better with any additional thought. Lily, you wrote in a piece today that Trump was like an abusive parent in the debate. Do you want to talk about that and maybe also any other thoughts that's lingering with you 24 hours later?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think a thing I found interesting before the debate even started was how much people on Twitter, anyway, were just dreading it. Like, I feel like there's some kind of collective response that a lot of people were having as if we knew how bad it was going to be. And I'm not sure that it's always messy to make these comparisons between like family structures and government, but because it's just everywhere in our political mythology, what with like the founding fathers and, all this other stuff that assumes a kind of paternalistic relation to, civic polity. It did really seem to me like what was going to be painful about it was that we have watched Trump trample so many boundaries, violate so many rules, and get away with so much that it was going to be painful, I think, to watch him continue to do that. I think probably like when there is an abusive relation, one of the awful things is watching the world around not react and not acknowledge what's happening and not stop it. So what was interesting to me about how Biden handled the constant interruptions and the asides and the kind of vicious, mean-spirited jabs when Biden was talking about his, dead son, was that Biden did a pretty good job of occasionally turning to the camera and addressing the American public and being like, look at what's happening. Look at what he's doing. Is this what you want? How many times has he lied to you? And I mean, I think while there was a certain like catharsis to him saying like, will you just shut up? Which I think is a sort of like fantasy for, the way one would like to have such a relative dealt with. I think also he did a pretty decent job of actually just narrating the relation, which was to me actually really refreshing to see. And so was his takeaway about voting, which was like, he does not control this, you control this, right? Like it was a refusal of kind of the frightening, abusive parental figure's authority, which has as its base, if you do not do what I want, I will hurt you, which is, I think, in some sense what Trump was threatening. I'll stop there.
Will, I guess, what are you still thinking about one day later after the low point in American democracy?
I'm kind of wondering if there's going to be another couple of debates and what they're going to be like, and whether the moderator, for example, will handle it any differently. So we just tried the relatively low-key moderator approach of Chris Wallace letting Trump do his thing to a certain extent. I mean, when I was watching the debate, one of the things that struck me, I mean, Joe Biden felt actually weak to me, weak because he was obeying the rules and because Trump wasn't. It was just weird to have Chris Wallace. There were clearly rules about you get your 2 minutes, the other guy gets his 2 minutes, right? And if Trump went first and then Biden spoke, Trump would just step in at that point to do a rebuttal, even though it wasn't authorized, and he would just talk over Wallace. And when it was reversed, Biden didn't do that. And I kind of worried that the Trump strategy would work, that he would get more talking time, get his points across, and that would actually help him. So I was enormously relieved after the debate, and I am still relieved today that it backfired. That was extremely encouraging to me. So 24 hours later, I'm grateful that it didn't work, and I'm hoping that sets a precedent for future debates, that this doesn't happen again.
Yeah, I was kind of a little worried in the beginning too, because I saw what Trump was trying to do, and it was kind of predictable. I mean, he was trying to control the pace. He was trying to throw around a lot of misdirection, trying to interrupt Joe Biden's train of thought, because Joe clearly had memorized a lot of things he wanted to get across. And Trump was just there interrupting. But he just took it so far that he really got in his own way. You know, I thought that Trump as a whole was, you know, a little bit sharper than Biden last night, but he couldn't, you know, there were times where you would see Biden sort of get a little stuck about where he was going with a certain statement. And then Trump would just interrupt with some sort of insult and almost save Biden that way. So yeah, it was something where I watched the first half hour and I was like, oh, I see what Trump's doing. You know, this could be kind of a nightmare for Biden. But then it got so aggravating.
I'm kind of interested, Lily, in the abuser way of looking at it, in part because when you're, you know, the tendency of political reporters is to attribute strategy, right? What's his strategy? What's Trump's strategy in behaving this way? And I wonder if we were looking at a strategy or just a personality and impulses.
I mean, I think, Will, what you said about, you know, him getting away with it, right? Like Trump breaking the rules. I think there's a really interesting theory that I have maybe erroneously attributed to Max Weber. I don't know, but like about what charisma is and the extent to which charisma actually means being unconstrained by the rules in some sense, like exceeding them and not being punished for it. And I think that has to some extent been Trump's superpower, politically speaking. So I'm with you in that, like, I was relieved to see it backfire, because it did seem to me like if this is okay with people, then whatever version of Trumpian charisma exists is maybe impossible to strategically combat. I don't know, you know, so I do think that it was strategic. I think he's used to having that work for him. But I also think that my impression was that he's very unused to being challenged. I mean, at this point, right, he's been president for almost 4 years and surrounded himself with yes men and gone to rallies where everybody adores him. So I actually think he's not very well equipped to deal with pushback, and that actually sent him over the edge from like the charismatic, occasionally playful persona he's able to occupy at his rallies into like a really mean-spirited persona that I think might be closer to an actual personality and not a strategy.
Jim, wasn't that supposed to be? Sorry, I thought didn't Obama have the same problem against Romney that he had? I mean, he's not like Trump, but also surrounded by too many yes men and wasn't prepared for debating Romney.
Yeah, I mean, that was the case in 2012 when the first debate, I mean, the consensus was that Romney really floored Obama in that debate. And that was the general theory. I mean, one is that when you're president, you already think you know everything just because you've been in the office and you're dealing with this every day. So you don't actually have to prepare. And the other is, yeah, that you're not used to someone actually talking back to you. I mean, the most you get is an interviewer occasionally saying, you know, sir, I'd like to push back on that fact. You don't have someone calling you a liar or saying that your policy is, you know, a complete failure right to your face for a while. I mean, I was wondering if Trump might break that rule if, you know, because he does a lot of interviews and he does get some like fairly strong pushback in some of them. So I wondered if he'd just roll with it. But I do think, you know, when Biden told him to shut up or called him a clown or, I mean, he got so ticked off when Biden said he wasn't smart or something. I mean, do you remember that? That's when he was like, don't you say the word smart around me, Mr. Delaware State, last year class. Like, what do you say? Like, you're a complete idiot or something? I mean, that really seemed to set him off. You know, I'm not sure he's had anyone talk like that to him in a very, very long time.
Yeah. I remember I was worried, though, during the debate. So, I mean, I'll confess that while I was watching the debate, I mean, I thought it was horrible. Like, I had in my notes about 20 minutes in, I said, we're 20 minutes in, and I want to turn this off. I mean, I couldn't turn it off because it was my job to watch it, but I thought other people would turn it off. But as I was watching it, I did not have confidence in my impression of the debate. My impression is, oh my God, Trump's behavior is awful. I hope other people are saying this, but I really worried a lot that Biden was coming across as weak, and that as crazy as all that stuff sounded about don't get smart with me. And I mean, especially when Biden started talking back, that stuff where he said, he called him a clown, as you said, and I forget what the other ones were. He pretty much told him to shut up. And I thought, now Joe Biden can't do that because then he'll be on the same level with the abuser, and that would cost him. But it doesn't seem to have played that way.
I felt like he was kind of like, you could see Biden being a little conflicted about that, because he probably, through debate prep, they probably had someone taunting him, and the whole idea was, don't lose your train of thought, keep focused on the viewer and what they want to hear and what you're going to do for them. But at some point, I mean, it was just a degree worse than maybe the preparation even was. And he just had to say something like, please shut up,
Yeah, there was the keep yapping man. And there was, will you just shut up? And there was also the racist. He called him a racist.
He did, and kind of like, in a kind of moment where it came out of nowhere, he just dropped it like, oh, okay, there you went, and called him a racist. I mean, Will, you mentioned Chris Wallace. I mean, I feel like I've seen a lot of people saying that he lost control of the debate, and control of the debate was definitely lost. I thought he was pretty aggressive throughout the debate, though, of trying to, in kind of these wimpy ways that obviously Trump is just not going to respond to well, like, sir, we agreed, there are rules about 2 minutes. And it, clearly that wasn't going to work very well on Trump. But I saw an interview with Chris Wallace today where he says he felt a little bad that he should have enforced it more. But I mean, I personally thought he did what he could. And if someone is intent on making an ass of themselves, that's part of the story of the debate too. It's not necessarily a moderator failure.
Well, I was going to say, having watched a lot of Chris Wallace interviews, my experience of him as an interviewer is, if he's trying to get factual information from you, he's got a list of things he wants to get through, and he needs you to get to the question and answer the question, he'll press you, and he'll stay on you, and he'll shorten your answers, and he'll intervene a lot. If he thinks you are making an ass of yourself, I am in particular remembering an interview with Kellyanne Conway where she just went off on a rant. It amazed me how long he just kept his mouth shut, because he saw that what she was doing, and he just let her do it. And I kind of wondered at times during the debate whether he was letting Trump do that. If you do that as the moderator, you better be really sure that the guy is actually making an ass of himself, and not that by you backing off, he's dominating the debate and scoring points in a way that's going to help him.
Lily, what did you make of it?
Gosh, I mean, I think I agree with you, Jim, that it seemed to me like he was trying hard to keep Trump in check. I'll say two things. So number one, I think that he did a pretty decent job of talking over Trump as much as he could while Trump was trying to make a point in a way that did, I think, successfully muddle Trump's message to the point where I at least could not follow what Trump was saying, because Wallace was talking, sometimes Biden was talking too. So as awful as that was, it felt like it had to happen as pushback. Otherwise, Trump was just going to suck up all the airtime. And I think that was hard to do. And it was certainly painful to watch. It felt awful to watch. But the second part of it that I found kind of interesting too, which again, was why I started thinking about abuse as a model, was that Wallace kept trying to placate Trump by saying, no, you're going to like the next question, right? There was this weird appeal to, no, you're going to be so happy, right, about the next thing that I'm going to ask you. So just let me talk and you're going to like it. It between a toddler and a king was how I put it, because it was just supplicant in this really kind of greasy, strange way. I don't know that he had a choice in the moment, but it definitely rubbed me the wrong way. Yeah.
I mean, there were definitely some times where he was like, I remember one time specifically after a long bit of, what they call in transcriptions crosstalk, where Wallace just said, that topic is over. Now we're going to a new topic. I mean, it was really just the grade level that he had to talk just to kind of center things back to where he wanted them was pretty amazing.
On Lily's point about...
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Will.
No, I was going to say, Lily, about on this point of the aggressor pushing the referee, right? I felt that all over the debate. It was Wallace accommodated Trump. If Trump wanted to speak out of turn and do an extra rebuttal, Wallace would try to stop him. Mostly, he let him get in at least a half a minute or so of rebuttal. He just sort of accepted that. And Biden, and the same thing happened to Biden in the Democratic debates, right? Biden would be like the only person following the rules and observing the time limits. And so, in a way, Biden suffered for that. But I think overall, Trump's behavior was so overwhelming that that overshadowed any benefit that he might have gotten out of the. So he got a comparative advantage in time, but it didn't matter because he just overwhelmed it with boorishness.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem is that debates, I mean, good faith debate is such an oxymoron anyway, but like presidential debates always just boil down to weird monkey brain dominance exercises in a way that I find incredibly unhealthy for anything like democracy. But like, the concern is always, I think, with Trump that you're just going to watch that work, right? Remember when he hulked behind Hillary Clinton to like show that he was bigger than she was, as if that was a rhetoric worth like engaging, but it worked. Like, I mean, I think a lot of people thought that he won or looked more powerful or whatever. I think that Biden, thinking back to like how he acted in the debates during the primary, he kept saying, "Oh, I'm out of time, so I'll stop there." Like he didn't even finish answering questions and would actually invoke the time limit that he was circumscribed by, which I think in ordinary political times would scan as like submissive or weak. I mean, I see your reading, Will. Like I think that's totally reasonable and it's there. I think because Trump is making it so clear in the like abusive model that he finds equality humiliating. Like he should never have to obey the same rules as anybody else ever, right? And that has been, I think, the consistent drumbeat throughout his presidency. And people, I think, are really sick of that. And so it's my hypothesis, and it's tentative, is that actually Biden's rule following might be a welcome change for those who are just desperate for some semblance of normalcy, like as unlikely as it is that I think normalcy is likely to return.
Let's take a question from the comments. I should have mentioned earlier, by the way, if you have questions, please leave them in the comments. But this one is from Daniel Smart. Question is, should the next debate moderator be allowed to cut the mics? This is a hot topic of discussion today. What do you guys think?
Well, I would say yeah, but I wouldn't use it. I mean, I think if you there's a real danger. I mean, we saw one bad kind of debate, right, where Trump sort of bullies his way too much. But there's every possibility that if we try the opposite in the second debate, which I can't imagine. Steve Scully has the second debate, right? I mean,
yeah,
he's not going
to.
Yeah,
the most patient man in Washington for his dealings with C-SPAN callers. Yeah.
So the town hall format won't be such a problem because there will be. I mean, if you watch the Stephanopoulos debate, the ABC town hall with Trump, that was just having real people asking the questions and doing follow-ups meant that Trump couldn't behave abusively toward them in the same way that he could behave toward the media, because they're just not a whipping boy. They have electoral power and it just looks bad. But I can imagine a scenario where we have a moderator cutting off Trump's microphone and it just becomes an adversarial thing between these two people. And, as they say in sports, if the referee becomes the story, you've in soccer, right? If the referee calls a penalty kick and decides the game, that referee is considered to have ruined that game. So they try really hard not to do it. And I imagine they would do the same even if they had the power to cut the mic.
I think that's right. And I think I've been thinking about this a lot. Well, first of all, Chris Wallace's objection, which I take seriously, and our colleague Aaron Mack actually wrote a piece about the possibility of muting the mic if anybody's interested in reading it. But one problem might be that muting the mic won't work. right? Like that Biden's mic would pick up whatever Trump said or vice versa if they were muted. But in terms of the moderator problem, I do think that could be solved if it were literally automated, which there is no reason we couldn't do. It would make for a very strange, stilted debate. But if there were like a mechanized thing that would only activate each mic for a certain period of time and it was pre-programmed and nobody was in charge of it, I would be interested. I don't think it's appropriate for a town hall scenario at all, but like I do think it's at least worth considering.
What do you think, Jim?
What do you think, Tim? Yeah.
I pretty much agree with you word for word, Will. It's something that sounds great, and when you were watching the debate last night, it was like, boy, wouldn't it be great if they just, use electronics to shut Donald Trump up for a minute here. But yeah, I just think of all the pitfalls. I mean, one, you can envision a scenario where Trump is trying to get the moderator to cut off his mic so then he can play the martyr and say they're coming to get him. And, I don't think that would actually work with the sort of swing voters that he desperately needs to do something with. But, it could just be an incentive that makes the debate even worse than you would think. And yeah, I mean, are you also really, you want to encourage some discussion in the debate? Are you really going to enforce that so strictly that you literally give everyone 2 minutes to say everything and then it just stops entirely? So I don't know. It seems a little bit like too much of a sledgehammer. But I don't know. I would be interested to see how it would play out. Even though I think it would be bad, I'd be interested to see if they had that option, if they used it. But I mean, we'll see. Do you think Trump will be on his manners in the town hall? I can see why he's more likely to be on his manners, but I mean, what if he just takes like a prompt from a question and then just says like, thanks for your question. Hey, Joe, you suck, like it doesn't actually benefit enough. I mean, I don't know.
I'm trying to, Lily, do you remember the Trump-Clinton town hall debate? I can't remember. All I remember is that him coming up behind her, but I don't really remember whether in that format he was restrained relative to this kind of debate we just saw.
I mean, I think it was like at the time jarring, but relative to what we've seen since, I mean, yeah.
Was that the heavy breathing debate, or was that all the debate? I remember there was one where you could hear like every breath he took on the mic, and he was like hulking up to Hillary Clinton and breathing heavy to his mic, and it was like, are the police in there? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
The Stephanopoulos thing.
No, go ahead.
Sorry. No, go ahead, Lily.
I'm just going to say my theory is that he'll be somewhat more sedate because he is getting a lot of pushback even from Republicans for failing to condemn white supremacists. I think, and also like I think a lot of Republican commentary has basically, gently suggested that he was over the top and insane and hurting his own cause. And I think he's likely to. He already seems to be backpedaling somewhat. He's trying to, in his wishy-washy way, like find some way to not quite condemn the white supremacists, but to say that it should be condemned. So he is, I think, in a walk back mode. I think, yeah. So I think he's likely to be less of a crazed,
Well, you can kind of already see the narrative being set up, right? Like he goes too far. And then everyone tells him he needs to calm down. And then he has this very low bar where he just needs to be a little bit calmer next time. And everyone will be like, oh my God, Trump was so much better. Did you see how much calmer he was this time? So I mean, that's
the day he finally became president.
Right, exactly. So, that's something we all have to look forward to in the next debate. But yeah, Go ahead, Will.
I was going to say, I am so old. I remember the Gore-Bush debate in 2000 when Al Gore did exactly that. He was considered in the first debate to have come on too strong and been too aggressive. And he scored a lot of points and, it was better than Trump. It wasn't crazy. It was just very strong. And afterward, he was considered to have lost. The ratings showed he had lost the debate, the poll ratings. And so the second debate, he comes back with a completely different Al Gore. He comes out, he's meek and mild and passive, and I liked it, but I was the only person in the world who liked the second Al Gore debate. Everyone else considered it to be a failure. So I very much doubt Trump, being Trump especially, would go too far in that direction.
Yeah, it's kind of the anti-Kavanaugh trajectory, right? Remember Kavanaugh's "I'm a good little boy" interview that Trump was evidently displeased with, so then he performed his angry, crazed maniac routine during his confirmation hearings. Yeah.
Can I make?
Talk about this? Yeah.
I was going to say, can I make a confession about the white supremacist moment? When Trump said what he said, I did not at all read that as the thing that was going to blow up. And the reason was, I was shocked that he said it at all, that he said anything. I was sure, as soon as Wallace asked the question, do you condemn the white supremacists? I thought that's exactly the right question, because Trump is not capable of saying no to anybody who supports him. Not capable of saying it to Vladimir Putin, not capable of saying it to the Proud Boys or whoever. So the fact that Trump said anything at all shocked me. And it wasn't the part about stand by. I wasn't even focused on that. So this is one of these things, as debate watchers, we all sort of watch, and we're going to see things somewhat the same. But I was really blown away at how that struck other people. I mean, afterwards, I saw Van Jones talking about it, and Van Jones said, I only heard 3 things in this debate, and all 3 of them were that moment. And I was like, okay, well, I'm a white guy, so that's not the way I heard it. But I really wondered how many people heard it that way, and it turned out there were a lot of people.
To me, I mean, I think to me that the moment that really stuck with me was the silence after, because he said that he would, and then both Biden and Chris Wallace turned to him and said, okay, well then do it. And then there was the only silence that Trump sustained throughout the entire debate. And that silence was real pregnant to me. And then what he eventually said, stand back and stand by. Yeah, it read to me. It's particularly because he followed it immediately with Antifa and the left need to be dealt with. Like it did, for what it's worth. Like it did strike me as, stand by strikes me as what a commander says to his troops. Like it strikes me as like embodying a relation of some intimacy, which I think is how the Proud Boys took it. Like they were putting that phrase on their logos by the end of the night. But I can, for what it's worth, that's how I heard it.
Yeah, the way he said it in this very sarcastic, whiny kind of way. Yeah, stand down, stand by. And I also didn't quite fully grasp this. Like the stand by thing didn't make me leap the way that when he said, there were some bad people on both sides after Charlottesville. But then when, later on in the debate, when they started talking about the fairness of the election, and he was talking about the need for poll watchers and how we need to make sure there aren't any phony ballots. And this is when he was being asked to, urge his supporters to stay away from violence in the streets or anything while mail-in ballots are being counted. Then I thought he doesn't want to, it's a really disturbing thought, but like he doesn't want to fully denounce some of these people fighting for him in the streets because he feels like he might need them when votes are being counted and there's this kind of public war over the count and the fairness of the count and everything. So I thought it was more chilling the more I think about it. And I know they're all trying to walk it back. I think that when you look at some of the responses from Republicans on the Hill today, they weren't running with, most of them at least, were not running with, oh, you guys are overblowing this. Trump clearly denounced him. You're just trying to get him. I mean, they were like, yeah, he needs to do a better job of that. Tim Scott from South Carolina said, I think he needs to clarify what he's meaning if he didn't mean it. And if he doesn't clarify, then I guess he meant it or something like that. So, there was room for concern around him about his failure to kind of adequately condemn these groups and to tell these groups to stop it.
I mean, I think the thing that was striking to me about the dynamic is that he was really convinced that getting Joe Biden to say anything against the left was going to cost him the left. Like he repeatedly said, denounce the Green New Deal, right? Denounce, say law enforcement, say law, and each time regardless of what Biden said, because Trump wasn't listening, he would be like, "You just lost the left. You just lost the left." And because Trump is always, I think, guilty of some projection, it was very apparent to me that he really feels like he cannot denounce white supremacists because that's part of the little support that he has. And so, actually, when I tweeted about that pregnant silence that I found so striking, and I said, and when after that long pause he couldn't do it, a lot of people said, and I understand why, they would correct me, they would be like, wouldn't do it, not couldn't. But I actually think it is couldn't. I think that Trump feels like he cannot reject those people. I think he's cornered and a little bit desperate. Yeah.
Should we get to a couple of the questions?
Yeah. Will, do you want to pick one?
Well, there's a question about someone asked about whether we could improve the debates through something like live fact checking, and I was going to say that my experience of watching Trump and Trump's acolytes interviewed is what works best is to have a moderator, an interviewer, a single person who is simply sufficiently well versed in all of the facts that person can instantly respond as part of the next question. And the person who I think is best at it is George Stephanopoulos. Jake Tapper's also pretty good at it when he gets the opportunity. And then the art of it is to do it extremely concisely. Trump has just said something nuts, wrong, or Kellyanne Conway has, and you in just a couple of seconds say, well, that's not true. It was actually such and such. I mean, we're talking 5 seconds, and without rancor, and you just move on. You don't leave an opportunity for that person to rebut you. So that has to do with the choice of a moderator. Steve Scully is not going to do that. I don't think that's his job. Chris Wallace could have done it, but clearly chose that was not going to be his role. So to me, it's all about the choice of the moderator, and then the moderator having both the skill to do it and the will to do it. I don't know what you guys think.
I think it's so hard. I mean, Trump, the style he uses makes it so much more difficult because he's jumping from thought to thought so quickly. I mean, there was, like early in the debate yesterday, he said Biden is for Medicare for all. He wants to destroy private health care. And it was just not true. I mean, you try to push back a little bit, but, then it's Chris Wallace spending more and more of his time. I mean, I guess what you said, if they could find a way to very artfully be like, that's not true, move on, but then that would be litigated by Trump or by Biden, and it would kind of go on forever. So I mean, I would like to see more fact checking on obvious whoppers, but then it becomes something where, how do you even have a conversation? I think the way that, like CNN, they have Daniel Dale, I guess, go on afterwards and give his litany of false statements afterwards. But, I think Trump knows that if he goes too slow, then they're going to call him out in certain things. And that's why he just talks through it.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the problem too is that, I mean, there was a moment during when Trump just kept acting like he didn't know who Joe Biden was while Joe Biden was talking about his death, where he kept on bringing up Hunter. And it turned into this thing where Joe Biden just kept saying, that's not true, which is something that Joe Biden ended up saying a lot that night. And it's not, the horrible quandary is that when you have like someone you just bullshitting on the one side, saying that's not true on the other is not actually doing much to change the stagecraft of the scene. And I mean, and I think it doesn't help, right? That it doesn't help that so many of Trump's statements actually are incomprehensible. So our colleague Ben Mathis-Lilly made a list of like the things you probably forgot that happened, which includes things like when he said they want to take out the cows, like ballots and creeks. There is this, like, what people call it, the Fox News cinematic universe, right? Like this extraordinary litany of like patchwork references to things that don't actually make sense and are in some sense unfact checkable because nobody can even pin down what the phrase is in reference to. So I question the possibility of fact checking. I don't know. Yeah. I guess we have 5 minutes.
Yeah, I guess we can do a couple more. Is there anything super pressing that you guys want to get to, or should we just?
I think we could do a couple of the questions. Somebody had asked about the why the debate lacking an effect on the not having an effect on the polls, on the race, and is that a problem? Should we expect the debate to have an effect? But I mean, just to go back to Lily's original point, if we saw the same Donald Trump in this debate that people have seen on the campaign trail and at the White House, it's entirely predictable that there wouldn't be an effect on the race. Anyone who expected a surprise didn't see one. Anyone who tuned in saw the same thing that the people who had already tuned in saw. And speaking as somebody who doesn't want Donald Trump to get reelected, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with a debate that failed to move the race away from a likely Joe Biden victory. But I don't know how either of you feel about it.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, Trump has one move, appealing to his base, and that's what it was, and that's why he's in the position he's in. I mean, if you were the 40% or whatever that's gung ho about Trump, you probably loved it. I mean, you really probably loved it the way he treated Joe Biden. If you're suburban women who are drifting away from the Republican Party entirely, you probably thought it was disgusting. I think if you're senior voters who are drifting away from Trump, you probably did not like the way he conducted himself. So it just seemed to me to kind of reinforce the schisms that are out there. And if you compare it to the presentation that was made during the Republican convention, when it wasn't really Trump doing all the video work, it was his advisors. That was much more about outreach to suburbanites, trying to reach out to Black voters or Hispanic voters, and trying to show the softer side of Trump. And that was just if you compare that to what we saw last night, it's just such a glaring contrast between Trump's one move and what he's good at and the only thing he is capable of doing, and what operatives feel he needs to do to keep himself alive.
We've got a question about Kamala Harris and Mike Pence's debate. And anybody have thoughts on that?
Lily?
Oh. Well, thinking back to Mike Pence's performance in 2016, it was interesting. It wasn't quite Trumpian. But what he did, if you remember, was he just kept chuckling as if things that were brought up as things Trump had said were patently ridiculous and clearly untrue. Like, that was his move. He wasn't, in my view, a particularly skilled debater beyond his ability to just literally deny that reality was reality. Like, he'd be like, oh, it's ridiculous that he would ever say that or think that. I don't think he's going to be able to do that this time around. And Kamala Harris is she has experience, obviously, as a prosecutor. I will be watching with interest and probably with less fear of witnessing a horrible Gish Gallop that's impossible to extricate oneself from, because I think both of those people are likely to proceed along fairly conventional lines, even if Pence is trying to pretend that reality is not reality. I don't know that Kamala Harris will let him get away with that. And I also don't know if it's possible given how massively overexposed Trump is at this point. But I mean, he did deny, he said that he paid millions and millions in taxes just last night. So who knows, What do you think, Jim?
Yeah, I'm curious what kind of strategy Harris will take, because I remember the way she was kind of introduced and presented at the convention was very much a hey, get to know me. It's Kamala Harris sort of thing. It was not. I thought her speech would be much more aggressively prosecuting Trump's failures, and I'm curious if she's going to sort of play a role as defender of Biden and sort of a measured performance, or if she is really going to do what she excels at, which is nailing Trump to the wall. The only thing I remember from 2016 that debate. I feel like Tim Kaine was really strange in that debate. I remember, well, one, I was annoyed because it was the night of an Orioles wild card playoff game that I had to miss. So I was like only half paying attention, to be honest. But, you know, like Tim Kaine, who's sort of picked because he's this nice guy who everyone can kind of accept, was just really going hard after Mike Pence, and Mike Pence wasn't biting, and it made for a strange effect. So I don't think that Mike Pence is a brilliant debater, but you can't really take him for granted.
Well, I'll say I'm excited. I'm excited to see Kamala Harris go at Mike Pence because I am not a Joe Biden fan as a candidate. I think Joe Biden is in decline, and I think he is a little too weak. And Kamala Harris is probably the best debater of all the Democrats who ran for president. And she's just tremendous at making a case and making a prosecutorial case in particular. So I am really hoping, like everything that I don't expect to get out of a Joe Biden debate, I am hoping to get out of a Kamala Harris debate. I am hoping for her to rule that debate. And I hope, Jim, that she will prosecute the case, that she will be the aggressor that Joe Biden isn't.
All right. Well, I think we're about at time. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Hopefully, we have something better to talk about after the next debate. But you know what? I kind of doubt it. But thank you. Bye, guys.
All right. Thanks, Jim.
Bye.